And they also had a piece, which, of course, given my interest in sort of the culture wars and things, had me interested. The supposedly fast-growing phenomenon of Theybies. And, well, I'll just do you a thumbnail sketch. I hope some of you have seen the program. So Theybies is when parents decide that they are not going to tell anyone else, apart from those who need to know, like doctors and things like that, what sex their baby is, so that their babies don't get trapped in being gender assigned. They can choose their own gender. And there was a dreadfully nice couple from Australia, and they were letting their baby decide what gender they were, and they wouldn't tell people and everything. And then they went to America. I think it was Portland. Was it Portland, Oregon? Where there was a woman who'd written a book on it. And she was a sociologist or something, and she'd had a baby who decided he was a guy, which he was. Luckily, everything matched up. And they were going to have another baby. And apparently it's a growing trend. And it's so good not to push kids into conforming to society's views. Well, oh, look, I'm just going to be honest. I think it's a load of todge. And I posted this on social media, and it seemed the vast majority of people who saw the story or saw about the story thought so too. So what the hell's going on? Well, look, I'm going to probably get a kicking for this, but I'm going to have on a guy who I would say used to head up Family First. I'm not sure he still does, but I would say he is a conservative campaigner for traditional values, would be the slot you'd put him in, because we've got to put people in slots. His name's Bob McCoskrie, and he joins us now. G'day, Bob. How are you?
Morning, Sean. How are you?
Good. Now, you're not still head of Family First, are you? Or are you?
Yep, still going.
Oh, you're still, okay, so you're still Family First, which is an organisation that campaigns on traditional values or traditional Christian values. Would that be the best way to describe it?
And biological truth.
And okay, you've added to the mission statement.
Well, no, it's always been part of the mission statement. We're just into facts and,
yeah.
you know, what...
We didn't used to have to mention it. They were just there, Bob.
Well, that's right, and that's what we're trying to protect.
Yeah. Okay, Bob, did you watch the Theybies thing on the Sunday program on TVNZ last night?
Well, I was fortunate because actually it's a 60 Minutes program that was screened 3 weeks ago. So
in Aussie.
I tracked it down. Yeah, and the good thing is when you watch it on YouTube, you can watch it at twice the speed, so you only waste half the time.
Oh, Bob, okay, I can see where this is going. Well, what do you think of the basic premise, Bob? The idea that we've got to let kids decide what they are.
Yeah, I mean, as one of my good friends said, we're in the middle of a pandemic of bonkers, and this is just another classic example. It's actually not the first time. It's actually old news, Sean, because I was looking back at kind of coverage of this issue, and actually one of the very first cases was actually back in 2011 when a Toronto-based couple decided that they would raise their 3 kids. The first 2 they had figured out whether it was a boy or a girl and told people, but the third they decided not to publicly reveal the sex of their third child. And so, you know, their oldest child, who's 10, says, oh, no, sex is what's between your legs, gender is what you think of yourself as a person, and all 3 kids were given their gender identity. In fact, I emailed you a picture of the family.
Oh, yeah.
Just earlier this morning with the pink hair. Dad's got the pink hair, Mum, and the youngest has got the pink hair. And of course, they were very, in big demand by National Geographic and 60 Minutes and Oprah Winfrey. The mum works in education and training and supports queer and transgender family programs, and Dad works in an alternative school. And so the oldest is a transgender girl, the middle is identifying as they, and the youngest is still to determine it. So that's 2011. And then 2018, there was then this big coverage, and it was on that woman that you just referred to. I think it's Kyle Myers, and she was featured in the Sunday program last night. But she was big news in 2018 because of this. And just reading from the article, it says, long before Kyle Myers ever gave birth, she knew she wanted her child to be a Theyby. or a baby raised without the construct of gender. She described the moment, that you'll love this bit, Sean. Myers described the moment she realised as a gender studies student at the University of Utah that gender was a social construct, one that she didn't want to impose this on her future child. Sure, there are biological differences among the sexes, I get that, but once I was exposed to it, I couldn't unsee or unlearn that gender is a social construction. And so they had a Theyby called Zoomer, and there's actually a website, front and centre, raisingzoomer.com, and it's all about this gender-free. It's like a rainbow exploded in an effort to be gender creative rather than gender neutral. And you probably heard that comment in the documentary last night, Sean, about how restrictive it is to think that 8 billion people are limited to the binary. And so this is all just part of the indoctrination.
Those silly 8 billion people, Bob. How silly of them.
Well, the problem is that these children, unfortunately, are entering a world where that is the case. They say binary is more confusing, these 8 billion people who can figure it out, than picking your own gender identity, apparently.
Bob, I want to unpick this, but I want to start from the concept that none of this is about the kids. This is all about the parents using their kids as an extension of their political or philosophical or ideological beliefs. None of this is primarily in the interests of the children. In fact, they are almost being exposed for political and ideological reasons and having their lives, their unusual lives, because of their parents, open to the world.
Yeah, and it's what a lot of medical professionals call family noise. It's kind of that ideology that surrounds the family, and the kids are kind of used as part of this campaign.
It's almost a form of Munchausen's by proxy.
What?
Munchausen's by proxy, where you pretend your kid's sick to get attention for yourself.
Yeah, but I think if you listen to the conversation, like in the documentary last night, they talked about, they talked to the parents. They say parents who want their child to be a footballer, but they want to dance. Well, that's nothing to do with changing their biology and changing them from a boy to a girl simply because the parents want them to be a footballer but the kid wants to dance. No, that's just simply fitting within gender stereotypes. Sure, we may have some work to do there in understanding that actually some girls like to play rugby and some boys actually like to do ballet.
They're called tomboys?
That's right.
And the other guys are called sensitive souls, sensitive wee sausages.
That's right. Yep, but that doesn't.
And you know what? A tolerant society. Bob takes men who aren't into rugby and treats them the same. Or we're tolerant of all the different types of men there are and types of women there are. As long as in New Zealand parlance you're not an a-hole. Bob always seemed to me to be the one. The one rule we had to have. Just whatever you are, don't be an a-hole. Look, it also strikes me, Bob, if we were to take this to its logical conclusion, if we're going to say gender is a social construct, surely ethnicity is too. Surely you can't raise your kid as like white or black or European or Caucasian or Pākehā or Māori. We should just let them decide what ethnicity they are, shouldn't we? Well,
ethnicity, age. I mean,
height.
I'd like to identify.
Height. Your kid might identify as 6'5" when they're 3 foot high.
Well, I want to identify as a child when I go to the buffet because then I get the cheaper rate.
Can you not do that? Who's rating on your parade at the buffet, Bob? That's totally unfair.
The problem. when you break the boundaries, and this has always been the modus operandi of Family First, is that when you break the boundaries, then you continue to get the mission creep, and we can see that happening in terms of this self-identity. Where does it stop? Where do you draw the line? I think what's really amazing about the whole gender thing is that then when you have someone come to the country and simply put up the premise that actually a woman is a biological woman and deserves to have safe space, suddenly all hell breaks loose. That shows just how bizarre and bonkers the whole culture is going, and it's problematic.
Bob, it is, and I'm sorry, I don't think it takes. We don't have to identify as Rhodes Scholars to pick this thing apart and say it's just fundamentally ridiculous. Thank God people aren't. I always think every time I get a plane, I hope the person flying the plane doesn't just identify as a pilot, because that, that could have consequences, couldn't it? Bob, I look at the climate, if you like, the atmosphere in which all this is happening. And I look particularly in Sunday, and nice Mariama there with her plastic smile, saying, this is a growing trend, and the piece said it was a growing trend. Well, they gave us no evidence it was a growing trend, the Theybiesism. But, of course, the weak-minded watching that might think it is and might want to feel special, and they'll give it a crack. They also asked people to give them their feedback on their Facebook page. I went and looked at TVNZ's Facebook page, and the comments were overwhelmingly, "This is crazy," which I'm sure will not be shared by the people at Sunday when they report back on that piece next Sunday. But I've also looked recently at the coverage or the miscoverage of the event you referred to, the Posey Parker thing, the terrible assaults that took place, the assault on free speech in this country, the inaction of police, and the woeful inability of our mainstream media to even admit that that happened. Do you think this sort of craziness is being aided and abetted by our legacy media?
Well, I mean, you may be aware that we've actually done analyses of some key social debates that have happened recently, including the cannabis referendum, the debate around abortion when Roe v. Wade was overturned, the conversion therapy debate, and more recently the protest at Parliament, where we quoted some of your excellent research that you did through Courier Market Research as to who was there, and it wasn't a extreme right-wing or political parties from the right being represented. It was a broad cross-section of New Zealanders. But what we found in all of this was, in fact, that the media are not reporting the news. They're trying to determine or influence people's opinions on all of these issues. And Sunday program has been well known for that. We've raised a beef with them a number of times. You know, they had a documentary a couple of years ago with glowing reports about puberty blockers being used on children who want to change their sex. Interestingly enough, in today's New Zealand Herald, there's an excellent article by Jan Rivers, who is talking about, and I think Jan Rivers was involved in Speak Up for Women, or there's some connection there, but it's an excellent article talking about the fact that the rest of the world is pressing pause on
it is indeed
puberty blockers, because puberty blockers do not they say, we just use puberty blockers to pause the process so that kids can make up their mind. Puberty blockers don't pause the process, they predict the process. Kids who go on to puberty blockers then go on to cross-sex hormones and then start, chopping off healthy body parts. And, we're chemicalising and castrating our kids in the name of this ideology, which is starting with Theybies. Theybies is the start of this ideology. As you say, it's adults targeting destructive ideology at children. And unfortunately, our media buys into it. And, of course, every time you read...
Look, the people on the doco last night looked relatively normal. I must admit, I looked at the Aussie couple and thought I probably wouldn't last 20 minutes at a dinner party where they were without having an argument. And not wanting to espouse violence, but the guy's face looked eminently punchable. But that's just me. That's my visceral human reaction.
Well, I think it's just the kind of bonkers aspect to it, that people are just shaking their head and saying, hang on, we can accept diversity of opinion, but this just seems to be devoid of any reality. And it just doesn't seem normal, and it's not normal. And, of course, that's why they get so much media coverage, and it's why Sunday program features it, because it is bizarre.
It's clickbaity.
And, of course, that's great viewing.
Yeah. Bob, look, the other issue, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, and I'm hoping to get Ian Wishart on later in the week. Ian Wishart's been raising some issues about people coming here as refugees or immigrants, coming here as immigrants to the country. And we have a vast range of medical conditions which, if you have, you're not going to get in. You're not going to get a road to residency in New Zealand if you come here sick, and you're going to be a burden on our health system. But Ian is suggesting on coverage he's seeing that we are allowing people to come here and have sex change operations on the New Zealand taxpayer. Is that true? Yeah,
I've seen some of that articles on that, and I'd be interested to know more. We actually did some polling on this, and we actually asked through Courier Market Research whether people thought the taxpayer should be funding sex change operations, and the majority were against it, obviously. No, it wouldn't surprise me because funding has been put into those, but I think it's the right questions to be asked, and hopefully Ian is firing off some official information at request. I caught up with him a couple of weeks ago, and he's doing some amazing work around the whole climate alarmism, and also just on topics like this. So I would say watch this space as he just gets some more documentation. But I can't comment on that particular case. I'd need to get some verification.
Bob, probably on my Twitter account, it's going to go off. People are going to say that Bob McCoskrie is a religious nutbag. Sean, you're part of the alt-right media. You're QAnon. You're a God botherer, which I'm not. You might be. That's up to you. That's your business. But Bob, this is part of a debate. Debates around, I guess, what you might call moral issues. I think we're now just debating scientific facts. Myself, what do you say to those who come at you and just say you're a busybody God botherer?
Well, usually they start saying that because they've lost any ability to reason or debate the issue. So to me, it's just a sign that they can't debate the issue anymore, and so they start throwing some labels around. Look, that's fine. We're willing to. In fact, if you look at the resources on Family First website, you won't see any God bothering. You'll see a whole lot of well-placed argument, research, and facts and figures. And we've been involved in a number of debates where it's not been about God bothering. For example, the whole debate around whether we should legalise recreational use of cannabis, which we think is a harmful drug, especially with the potency that's out these days. And as the longer that debate goes on, the more time between when we have the next vote on that, the stronger will be the no, because the evidence coming out of the United States in terms of what's happening with legalisation of cannabis and then other drugs getting involved, I mean, it's pretty alarming reading. But, that's a case where the debate had nothing to do with God. It was actually about what was safe and health for families.
Mm. And what can we do about the Theybies, or do we write the Theybies off as a bit of clickbait fun for the mainstream news media, and something that, given that most people have got functional craniums or something functional in their cranium, is never going to take off?
Well, an interesting thing happened with that Albert Park incident, Sean. I actually think it was a tipping point, because I think people were willing to sit back and just say, well, look, you to yourself, you be you, but what we saw at Albert Park was just the response, the visceral response that came out when the ideology was challenged. And I think that was actually a wake-up call, and people sort of thought, well, hang on, that doesn't look good. This seems way more than just a you be you. This seems like it's an ideology that needs to be rammed down, forced down on our culture. And I mean, you have outlets like Stuff who won't actually even allow
debate,
a contrary view on. I mean, I don't think Stuff would actually print the Jan Rivers article that's in the New Zealand Herald today, because they have a policy of not countering the ideology of being.
Yeah, but then again, the Herald are happy to print anything from that person, Chanel Lyle, New Zealander of the Year. Young New Zealander of the Year.
Yeah. Every media has a weak point.
Yeah. So, Bob, I actually tend to agree with you. I do think Albert Park, for those who are paying attention, not for people who read the mainstream media, because it never really happened as far as they were concerned, because there was a backlash, it indicated to me too that faith in our legacy media, which is now below 50% on average, right? That has now been so eroded by their appalling behaviour and their abandonment of the basic principles of journalism that it did represent a tipping point where no longer is a false narrative the dominant narrative. I actually think people are now looking for truth and prepared to say what they think and prepared to not swallow the rubbish they get fed every day.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw the David Farrar at Courier Market Research. Also,
yeah, we made quite a thing of that. We had the single in the neutral column. We had the highest rating. The platform had the highest rating of 48% neutral. Our net rating was a bit right, but that's because no one on the left will actually come on the platform.
Well, that's right. But I thought what was most fascinating about that poll result was the fact that people on the left still saw Stuff and Radio New Zealand as being
in any way right wing. Yeah, not left. Yeah,
so that's why they're flocking to that side. Unfortunately, we're ending up with that kind of media climate, which is in the United States, where, in fact, if you look at the trust in the media in the States, it's in the high 20s. Wow. So it's really low.
Yeah.
But of course, you've got extremes of Fox on one side, and then you've got CNN and MSNBC on the other side.
Yeah.
It's very divisive, and I mean I
just watch RT if I want true balance, Bob. Hey, Bob, thank you so much for your time this morning. Okay, sure. That was a great yarn. We'll have to have you on again soon. That is Bob McCoskrie. He is still the CEO of Family First.